Okay, so not sure where we left off, but I know we left off, we answered number one. The graph tells us about the population growth of Utah. Okay, now let's talk about number two. What happened between 1950 and 2000? So what happened between 1950 and 2000 that causes such an increase in population? So here is where we have to go back to the text and we have to make an inference about what we think happened, right? So it says A, Utah was written about in the newspaper and that made people move there. B, trading posts and the fur trade caused in population to grow or to increase. And C, the Mormons moved there to hunt and gather. Okay, so let's go ahead and see what's going on in this text. It says from 1950 to 2000. Now, in the text, 1950 and 2000 is actually not mentioned, but we can make an inference as to what we think happened during those times. In the beginning, first of all, nowhere in the text does it talk about that they put Utah in the newspaper. Like, we can automatically eliminate A. But then it also talks about the fur trade. The fur trade was in 1776, which was a long time ago, right? It was way before 1950. But 1847 is what changed the game because Mormons began to move there. This is the key, in large numbers. And then it says they continue to prosper today. Mormons make up almost 70%. So the time where the population changed is when the Mormons began to move there, right? That was when the population began to increase. So remember we said we were going to eliminate A because they did not put Utah in the newspaper. And then B, the trading post is not what caused the increase. The Mormons coming is what caused that large increase, okay? Good. So you see how you have to be able to read the graph along with the passage in order to understand the graph better. So now let's move on to our guided practice. Now remember guys, in your guided practice you have to read the text first and answer the questions first before you come back and figure out the answers. So I'm actually not going to read the text, but we're just going to go ahead and analyze the graph and we're going to answer the questions, okay? Because you should have read the text on your own. All right. Now, when we look at the chart, we know that this is your chart or graph, right? Where is the title? This is the title of the graph, y'all. Okay? This is the title. So that means that I know that this chart or graph is talking about the number of automobiles on the road. And we know automobiles is another word for car. So here is our x-axis. The x-axis talks about the years, right? You always want to label your chart so you can help. It's actually already labeled, but it helps you to kind of understand when you label it again. And then this is your y-axis, of course, which talks about the number of cars, okay? And it talks about it by the thousands. All right, so let's go to number one. It says, what year? So when it says year, that means we need to look on the x-axis. What year had the second highest number of automobiles on the road? So it says second highest, not the highest. We know that the highest is 1916. The second highest, of course, is 1909 because the rest of them are lower. And so 1909 actually has the second highest number of automobiles. And so that's very easy when you just literally read the chart and you know what you're looking for. So if you chose 1909, you were correct. Now, let's go to number two. What happened that made, what happened that made such a large increase in cars between 1909 and 1916. So this graph doesn't tell us what happened. We actually have to go back to the text and read to figure out what happened between 1909 and 1916. So you guys should have read the text yourself, and you should have been able to pick out that information while you were reading. And so I'm going to actually go back to the text where it talks about what happened during that time. And so here in the second paragraph, it talks about what happened during that time. It says Ford reduced options, even stating that the public could choose whatever color car they wanted as long as it was black. The Model T sold for $490 in 1914. About 1/4 the cost of the previous decade. So what changed here is that they lowered the cost, right? They actually lowered the cost. Okay, it was a low number. And so by 1920 there were over 800 million registrations, and that's because they lowered because here in the first paragraph it talks about how they might use their how the car was very expensive, right? But then they lowered the amount. And so when we look down to number 2, it says A, more people passed their road test and were allowed to drive. Nope. B, the 1920s saw a tremendous growth in automobile ownership. C, the Model T was created for cheaper than the years before. Or D, workers got paid $5 a day. So, guys, it's not talking about the 1920s because 1920s is after this year span. What happened is that they created it cheaper so that people can afford it. Okay, which made the increase in cars go up here. Okay. All right. And okay. So guys, that was the last question. So now we're going to move on to your independent practice. For your independent practice, guys, you're going to see the chart, and then you have your text next to it, which is called Built for Speed. Okay. And then you have to look at the chart and answer the questions just like what we did here. If you have any questions, you can hit me up via Google Doc, Google Form. Please remember to, you could hit me up via office hours, but please remember to turn in your classwork and do your exit ticket, okay? All right, guys, see you tomorrow.